My name is Carrie Pendergrass, and I was 22 years old the summer my family made the choice that would change my entire life. People think betrayal happens loudly, shouting, slamming doors, dramatic confrontations, but mine happened in silence, in the span of 10 quiet minutes, in a rest stop in the middle of Colorado. I grew up in a house where it was safer to stay small. My dad, Travis, ran a hardware store where I worked full-time for scraps. College wasn't an option. According to him, it was a scam for people who didn't want real jobs. So I stayed home and made myself useful, even though every day felt like a reminder that I was living a life I didn't choose. My older brother Chase was everything I wasn't: athletic, charismatic, the walking embodiment of my father's pride. If Travis was the sun, Chase was the reflection he admired most, bright and blinding. I, on the other hand, was the shadow cast behind them. My mother, Lena, liked to pretend she cared about balance. "That's enough, boys," she'd say whenever the teasing went too far. But it was always said with a nervous laugh, like she knew she wasn't going to enforce anything. She just wanted to feel guilt-free. So when Travis announced a sudden family road trip to my uncle's wedding in Colorado, I should have known something was wrong. We didn't do family trips. We didn't do weddings. We didn't do anything that required togetherness. But like everything else in my life back then, I didn't have the power to say no. 3 days into the trip, it was already unbearable. I was wedged in the back of the Suburban between duffel bags and soda cans rolling under my feet. Chase and Travis took turns making jokes about me. "Did the thrift store pay you to take that shirt?" Chase laughed. "Carrie wouldn't know fashion if it bit her," Travis added. I pressed myself against the window, breathing slowly so I wouldn't cry. Crying only made them meaner. That morning in Colorado felt wrong from the second we pulled into the rest area. It was too empty, flat land in every direction, 2 vending machines, a lonely bathroom building, and air so thin I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. "I'm using the bathroom," I muttered. "Don't take forever," Travis snapped. I didn't bring my phone. It was charging in the Suburban. Didn't bring my wallet. We weren't staying long. I walked into the bathroom, washed my hands, stared at my reflection in the cracked mirror. Faded Metallica t-shirt, jeans with a hole in the knee, Vans splitting at the seams. I looked tired, like someone life had gotten bored of and worn down. When I stepped outside, sunlight forced my eyes to squint, and the parking lot was empty. No Suburban, no family, nothing but the wind. At first, I assumed it was a prank. Chase was always filming funny moments to post online. Maybe they parked behind the building. Maybe they were waiting for me to panic so they could laugh. I walked around the entire rest area, twice, calling out softly, then louder. "Travis? Chase? Mom?" Nothing. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. A trucker paused next to me. "You all right, miss?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm just waiting for my boyfriend." He nodded, unconvinced, and walked off. And that was the moment the truth finally hit me. Slow, cold, heavy. They left me. Not forgot, not misplaced, left. On purpose. I sat on the curb, fingers trembling, chest aching so hard I could barely breathe. Shame rose in me fast and hot. The urge to call them, to beg, nearly consumed me. Maybe they'll come back if I apologize, I whispered to myself. Maybe this is my fault somehow. But then every memory came rushing back like a flood. Chase mocking me for crying when I was 12. Travis saying I'd never survive 5 minutes alone. Lena insisting everything was just jokes. And then I heard their voices in my head. "She's probably crying right now. If she's not as stupid as she looks, she'll figure it out. We shouldn't have, but she'll be fine, right?" My heart shattered, and something inside me hardened. I forced myself to stand. Approached a woman with 2 young kids who had just stepped out of a minivan. "Ma'am," I said, voice barely steady, "could I borrow your phone? I need to call a women's shelter in Grand Junction. Not my family, not my mother, a shelter." She hesitated. It made sense. I probably looked desperate and half-broken, but she handed me her phone anyway. I called the shelter, then asked if she could drive me into town. She did. That night, I lay on a thin shelter mattress, staring at a cracked ceiling. The room smelled like detergent and quiet heartbreak, but underneath it all, there was a flicker of something else. Possibility. I wiped my eyes and whispered to myself, "You wanted to see if I could make it on my own. Then watch me." The first 3 nights at the women's shelter felt like living inside a bruise, tender, raw, sore with every breath I took. I wasn't used to kindness, so even the soft-spoken volunteers made me suspicious at first. Every "are you okay?" felt like a trap, like they were waiting for me to say the wrong thing. But they weren't. No one there wanted anything from me. No one mocked the way I spoke or rolled their eyes when I hesitated. That alone felt like stepping into a different universe. On the morning of my third day, they called me into a small office with faded motivational posters on the walls. That's where I met Jenny, the caseworker who would unknowingly become the first person in my life to ever look at me without trying to resize me into something smaller. She didn't flinch when I told her what happened. Not once. I expected shock, disbelief, maybe even pity, but she simply nodded and said, "People leave in all kinds of ways. You don't have to explain their choices, just your next one." She slid a paper toward me, jobs circled in red pen, dishwasher, diner help, warehouse night shifts. Then a bus schedule, then a voucher for a pair of work boots. "You don't have to restart everything today," she said gently. "You just have to show up." I showed up. That night, I worked my first shift at a greasy diner off a highway, midnight to 8 a.m. The steam burned my hands. The manager barked orders like I owed him money, and the floor was so slippery I fell twice. But I didn't complain. Pain was familiar. Exhaustion was home. The difference was that now the suffering meant something. It was leading somewhere. After my shift, I caught a bus to a rundown house where a man named CJ, a quiet mechanic in his late 50s, had a room for rent. His rules were simple: pay on time. Don't bother his dog, Roxy. That was it. He didn't ask about my family. He didn't ask why I only had one duffel bag. He didn't ask why my eyes looked like I'd spent years trying not to cry. The room was tiny. A twin bed, a flickering lamp, a dresser with one drawer that stuck every time I pulled it. But after spending nights on shelter mattresses, it felt like a palace. My kingdom, my first piece of freedom with a lock on the door. I picked up a second job 2 weeks later, unloading delivery trucks at a hardware store across town, run by a woman named Lisa, who offered me free coffee on my first day and didn't make fun of the bags under my eyes. That small kindness nearly broke me. I kept to myself. No social media, no contact with anyone from my past, no searching for my family, no tracking their lives online. I had disappeared from their world. I wondered if they even noticed. Every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering if they had turned back to the rest stop, whether they waited, whether they panicked. But then I remembered the silence, the empty parking lot, the voice in my head that whispered, "They aren't coming back." And something inside me steeled even further. After a month, I bought a prepaid flip phone. After 2 months, I started saving enough money to buy groceries that weren't just ramen. After 3 months, I began reading again. Not fiction, but things that felt like keys. Finance, coding, tech startups, philosophy. Late at night, sitting cross-legged on my thin twin bed, I devoured everything I could. I didn't know exactly what I was trying to build, only that it had to be strong enough to never depend on anyone like Travis again. One night, scrolling through forums on a borrowed laptop at the library, I stumbled onto a thread titled, "Teach Yourself Software Development. No college needed." My heart tightened. No college needed. No one to tell me I wasn't good enough. Just me and a door no one could lock. I downloaded free courses, HTML, CSS, Python, Git. I failed constantly. Pages crashed. Code refused to run. I cried once, silent tears dropping onto my keyboard. But then I tried again, and again, and again. Slowly, something extraordinary happened. I got better. I built terrible websites, then slightly less terrible ones, then ones that actually worked. By month 6, I took on my first freelance job, $50 for a simple blog layout. When the client paid me, I stared at my phone screen for a long time, unable to breathe. It wasn't the money, it was the fact that I earned it with my mind, not with sweat or burns or aching feet, but with skill. I felt valuable, and I had never felt valuable before. The diner started calling me reliable. Lisa at the hardware store trusted me with closing shifts. CJ knocked on my door sometimes just to say Roxy missed me. For the first time in my life, people liked me without being told to, without someone rolling their eyes and saying, "She's difficult. She's emotional. She's just Carrie." No, I was becoming someone else, someone who wasn't shaped by mockery or control. One night, staring at the glow of my laptop, I realized something. If my family came looking for the broken girl they left behind at a rest stop, they wouldn't find her. She didn't survive. The one who replaced her did. By the time a full year passed, I had become someone even I barely recognized. Not louder, not bolder, just stronger. quietly, stubbornly, relentlessly, stronger. My days were a cycle of work and study, diner, hardware store, bus ride home, coding until my eyes burned. Repeat, repeat, repeat again. Freedom didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly, like sunlight creeping across a floor. I moved out of CJ's house once I saved enough to get my own studio apartment. Nothing fancy, old carpet, walls that echoed, a kitchen the size of a closet. But the first night I slept there, on a mattress I bought with my own money, I cried until I couldn't breathe. Not from sadness, from ownership, from knowing no one could barge in and tell me to adjust myself to fit their moods. I bought a couch next, a cheap gray one. When I laid on it that night, it felt like lying on proof that I existed. 6 months later, my coding skills finally caught up with my ambition. A client named Aisha, who ran a small startup, offered me consistent contract work. I told her the truth. I don't have a degree. She just shrugged. I care about results, and you deliver. I didn't realize how badly I needed those words until that moment. Not approval, but recognition. That was when I started crossing paths with other developers. Online at first, then through local tech meetups. And that's where I met Evan Brooks. Evan was nothing like the men I grew up around. Soft-spoken, observant, smart in this patient, unhurried way. He didn't brag, didn't push, didn't try to dominate a room. He noticed things, like how I took notes in the margins of my notebook, how I twisted my hands when I was nervous, how I always sat with my back to the wall at events. Most men would ask why. He didn't. He just made sure there was always a seat available for me in the safest corner of the room. His ex, Aubrey Hale, showed up to a few meetups, tall, perfectly put together, the kind of woman who made people turn when she entered. She eyed me once with a small, curious lift of her eyebrow, but Evan didn't react. If anything, he moved a little closer to me, a quiet gesture that spoke louder than a declaration. Still, I kept my guard up. People who seemed kind often learned how to weaponize it later. By year 2, something unbelievable happened. I wasn't just surviving, I was building a life. I had savings, clients who trusted me, a circle of acquaintances who didn't look at me with pity or irritation. A tiny apartment full of things no one else had touched. But the strongest sign of change came from what wasn't happening. No one from my family reached out. Not once. Not on my birthday. Not on holidays. Not to ask where I was. Not to pretend they cared for appearances. They didn't call the shelter. They didn't file a missing persons report. They didn't ask anyone if I was alive or dead. The truth wasn't that they forgot me. It was that they didn't want to remember. The turning point arrived at a tech conference in Denver. My first time attending something that required a name tag and business casual clothing I bought from a thrift store the week before. I was standing in line at a taco food truck when someone behind me said, Carrie Pendergrass? I turned and saw Evan Sullivan, a guy from my high school math class. Not someone I was close with, but kind enough. The type who would hold the door for everyone, even when his arms were full. Wow, he said, eyes widening. You look good. I mean, really good. Where have you been? People thought something horrible happened. I froze. My heart beat once, hard. Horrible? I asked quietly. He nodded. Yeah, your family told everyone you ran off, that you just left without a word. Chase said you were unstable and your parents were worried sick. They made it sound like you ghosted them. Ghosted them. Left them. Rewritten history. Reversed roles. A villainization of the girl they stranded in the middle of nowhere. For a moment, rage pressed against my ribs like a scream trying to break free. Not fiery rage. Cold. Precise. Shaped like betrayal. I forced a small smile. Well, I said softly, something bad did happen, but I'm glad it did. He studied me for a moment, uncertain, then nodded and stepped aside as the line moved forward. But his words stayed with me long after. They didn't just abandon me. They didn't just erase me. They rewrote the entire story, turning themselves into heroes and me into the problem they bravely endured. I sat in my hotel room that night, Denver lights reflecting off the window, and whispered into the quiet. You didn't just leave me. You tried to erase me. But the thing about erasing someone is this. Sometimes they come back brighter. 3 weeks later, I was in a cozy coffee shop back home, exposed brick walls, soft jazz humming overhead, a notebook full of code open in front of me. When the universe twisted itself into a knot, the bell over the door chimed. A familiar voice ordered a black coffee with room for cream. My blood stopped moving. I didn't have to look. I knew that voice, that tone, that weight. Travis Pendergrass, my father, the man who drove away without looking back. I looked up just enough to see him. Older, more tired, less hair, same denim jacket he wore the morning he left me on that rest stop curb. He turned, he saw me. Our eyes met, only for half a second. Recognition crackled between us. He froze, and then he looked away. He walked out with his coffee, didn't say my name, didn't say anything. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but clarity. I didn't tremble, I didn't panic, I didn't wilt. I just watched him go and thought, I survived you. He left the shop, but for the first time, I didn't feel like the one abandoned. He did. I honestly thought that coffee shop moment would be the end of it. A strange twist of fate, a silent collision of past and present, a chance for the universe to ask, are you sure you're done with them? And I had answered, without saying a word, yes, I'm done. But life has a strange sense of timing. 3 weeks later, I was back at that same coffee shop, my corner table, my laptop open, jazz humming overhead like always. I was debugging a back-end function for a startup in Austin, and for once, everything in my life felt steady, peaceful, mine. Then the bell over the door rang. I didn't look up at first, but I didn't need to. Some voices imprint on you whether you want them to or not. Carrie. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something colder, recognition, boundaries snapping into place like armor. I closed my laptop slowly and looked up. Travis Pendergrass stood there, not the towering man of my childhood, not the thunderstorm I used to brace myself for, just a man, older, smaller, out of place. He approached my table with a strange steadiness, like he wasn't sure if I would bolt or bite. He stopped at the edge of my table. Carrie, he said again, softer this time. I met his eyes. Travis. He flinched, barely, but enough. I had never called him by his first name before. He was always Dad, a title he forfeited the day he left me at that rest stop. He opened his mouth, closed it, then sat down without asking. I didn't invite him, but I didn't stop him either. Silence stretched between us. You look good. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. I wasn't sure it was you. Last time, I mean. I still said nothing. He looked around the cafe as if searching for help, or the version of me he expected to find. The quiet girl, the obedient daughter, the one scared to breathe too loudly. But she was gone. Finally, he tried again. We didn't know you ended up out here. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't end up anywhere, I said quietly. I built this, alone. The words hit him visibly, like a slap he never saw coming. For the first time in my life, I watched Travis look unsure, like he was finally realizing he had underestimated the daughter he discarded. He shifted uncomfortably. Your mother, she misses you. So does Chase. I let out a soft breath. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. No, Travis, I said. They miss the version of me who didn't speak up, the version who took the blame, the version who made their lives easier. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. Neither was driving away, I replied, and you did it anyway. He swallowed hard. It was supposed to be a joke, he whispered. We didn't mean for it to go that far. My hands stilled on the table. I blinked slowly. You left me in the middle of nowhere. No phone, no money, no ID, and then you never came back. His face crumpled, just a little, but not enough to be remorse. More like regret that he had to face the truth out loud. That wasn't the plan, he said weakly. A joke is when everyone laughs, I said. I didn't laugh. Silence again, heavy, suffocating. People around us sipped their coffee, scrolled their phones, chatted softly, completely unaware that Table 7 held years of abandonment, shame, and a truth finally being dragged into daylight. He finally asked, "What was the worst part for you?" I met his eyes. It wasn't being stranded, I said. It wasn't being scared. It wasn't being alone. He leaned forward, bracing himself. It was realizing that not a single person in that car hesitated, not once. You were all okay with driving away. He looked like I had gutted him, but I didn't feel satisfaction, just release. He shook his head. I wasn't. Too late, I said. He closed his eyes for a moment, then tried again. You should have called us. We would have come back. I stood, gathering my laptop and slipping it into my backpack. You don't get to rewrite the story now, I told him. You're not the hero. You're not even the villain. I paused, leveling my gaze at him. You're a footnote. His lips parted in a soundless protest, but I was already stepping away. I walked out into the sunlight, not running, not shaking, not looking over my shoulder, just walking. in a way I never had around him before. I expected him to follow. He didn't. Some people don't lose you when they leave. They lose you when you finally realize you never needed them to begin with. After that day in the coffee shop, Travis didn't reach out again. No calls, no emails, no sudden apologies written in shaky handwriting. And I didn't expect any. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some wounds don't heal with a single, "I'm sorry." Some people don't come back, not because they can't, but because they no longer fit into the life you fought to build. I went home that afternoon, set my backpack down, and lit a small candle on my windowsill. I don't know why, it just felt right, like a marker, like acknowledging a transition from one version of myself to another. For the first time, I let myself feel proud. Proud of my survival, proud of the choices I made when I had nothing, proud that I hadn't caved the moment he sat in front of me. I wasn't the lost girl they left behind. I wasn't the ghost of their family story. I was a woman with a life they had no hand in shaping. A few weeks later, I was cleaning out an old duffel bag I hadn't touched since the shelter. At the bottom, shoved into a torn zipper pocket, I found something unexpected, a crumpled paper napkin. On it were my first job leads from the shelter, scribbled in my shaky handwriting. Diner, midnight shift. Warehouse, ask for Jerry. Hardware store, Lisa. My entire new life had been built on these 3 scratched lines. I stared at the napkin for a long time, longer than I expected, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It anchored me, not to the pain, but to the ascent. I placed the napkin into a simple frame, not as a trophy, not as revenge, but as a reminder of the girl I was when the world decided she was disposable. She survived anyway. She became me. That evening, Evan came over with Thai food and a bottle of sparkling cider. He noticed the frame the moment he stepped inside. "What's this?" he asked softly. I shrugged. "My first roadmap." He smiled, gentle, not pushing. "You going to hang it next to your diploma?" I laughed. "What diploma?" He grinned back. "You're the most successful dropout I've ever met." We clinked our glasses and sank onto the couch. My couch. The first thing I ever bought that wasn't secondhand. We ate too much food and watched a terrible action movie that made us both groan. He didn't ask about my family, not because he didn't care, but because he knew I would tell him when I was ready. That's the kind of love I let into my life now. Steady, soft, respectful. The kind that doesn't need to own you to care for you. The months that followed felt like building a home on solid ground for the first time. My freelance work grew into something bigger. My contracts turned into long-term collaborations, and eventually, the startup world took notice. I launched my own small development agency, specializing in tools and apps designed to help people start over. People like I had been. People clawing their way out of the dark. People looking for a door that wasn't locked. I hired a tiny team, 3 people. All brilliant, all underestimated by the world at some point. Every week, I taught a coding workshop at a community tech hub downtown. Many of the attendees were people rebuilding from nothing. Some fresh out of shelters, some living in cars, some carrying the weight of families who saw them as burdens. I recognized that hunger in their eyes, that exhaustion, that flickering hope. Sometimes they asked, "How did you start?" And I told them the truth. I didn't blame my family. I didn't name them. They didn't deserve the spotlight. I told the story simply. I was left behind once, and I rebuilt myself from it. Because it wasn't about what they did anymore. It was about what I did after. I didn't find revenge. I found purpose. I didn't seek their apology. I found my own strength. I didn't return to them. I moved forward into a life where they had no power. Every now and then, someone from my hometown emails me. "Hey, your dad looked rough today. Chase mentioned you once. He said you disappeared. Your mom cried at church last week, said she misses you." I never reply. Not because I'm cruel, but because I'm free. Because the girl they abandoned at a sun-bleached rest stop died that day. And the woman who rose from her memory doesn't owe them anything. If you asked my family where I am today, they'd probably still say I ran off, that I was unstable, that they did everything they could. But that's fine. They can hold on to their version of the story. I'm too busy living mine. I live in a loft with floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind I used to stare at in magazines, wondering who lived in places like that. Turns out me. I run a development agency. I mentor people fighting for a second chance. I come home every night to a man who respects me, not for what I survived, but for who I've become. And I wake up each morning knowing one truth. They thought leaving me would break me, but some of us don't break. We rebuild. And when we're done, We don't knock on the doors that once shut us out. We build better ones. We light bigger fires. We carve out lives so bright the world can't forget our names again.